Why does US President Donald Trump keep accusing Taiwan of stealing America's chip business?
They took the business away. Taiwan took our chip business away. We had Intel, we had these great companies that did so well, and it was taken from us, and we want that business back.
Taiwan leads by far in manufacturing the world's most advanced semiconductors, making over 90% of them. That's largely thanks to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. But Taiwan wasn't always a leader in this industry, which is seen as critical to the global economy and many countries' national security. Here's how Taiwan gained its chip dominance. It wasn't until 1958 that the first chip was made by Fairchild Semiconductor and Texas Instruments. And the name of the game in this sector is figuring out how to pack more transistors onto a smaller chip area. Gordon Moore, a co-founder of Intel, created this empirical law that the number of transistors in a chip doubles every 2 years, offering smaller and more powerful chips. With Intel at the helm, the US's chip sector grew quickly in the 60s and 70s. Intel launched a game-changing commercial chip that spurred a boom in personal computers. Meanwhile, over in Taiwan, the country was making its name in manufacturing. From textiles to umbrellas to Barbies, East Asia, but specifically Taiwan, became a cost-effective destination to produce things. But the government was looking to have a stake in the high-tech industry. And so in the 70s, it set up the Industrial Technology Research Institute, or ITRI.
So back in the 70s, Taiwan was under a so-called planned economy. That means a lot of economic growth is following the government policy. So they formed the ITRI by combining three organizations.
This eventually proved vital to the growth of Taiwan's domestic chip sector.
The purpose is just partially sponsored by the government. ITRI does the research to help the Taiwan's industry to grow, the economy to grow.
Going back to the US, over at Texas Instruments in 1976, an employee puts forward an idea of an independent foundry model. Now, this was rejected. This person ended up leaving the American company in the early 80s and was recruited by Taiwan's ITRI. This was, if you haven't guessed already, Morris Chang.
Back in the 70s, how many people really understand the semiconductor, right? So when there's a group of people, once they decided that's something Taiwan wanted to invest, so we send people to US, ITRI send people to US and then get trained and come back to Taiwan and license the technology from US.
This was the CMOS IC Technology Transfer Licensing Agreement, whereby RCA agreed to transfer its know-how in complementary metal oxide semiconductor technology to Taiwan. Now, though this was a generation or so behind the latest chip designs by leaders like Intel and Texas Instruments, it was a start. It was difficult for publicly funded ITRI to compete with the innovation and pace of commercial companies like Intel. Now, Intel's chips were everywhere. Now, thanks to them, the US was producing over 30% of the chips in the world. Now, Chang, though, observed that there were many chip designers who wanted to start their own companies. But the problem was, wafer manufacturing was just too expensive.
And during this time also kind of created a so-called OEM, the foundry business model, which is a TSMC was formed.
And so with the backing of the government, Morris Chang revisited his idea of an independent foundry model and established TSMC. TSMC would be the first company of its kind, focused only on making increasingly advanced chips. This way, TSMC would also avoid being a competitor with the established chip firms, gaining them as customers instead. It's a business model that massively paid off, especially as labor costs in the US steadily rose in the 90s and early 2000s, pushing even more firms to outsource production to TSMC. For example, in 1998, TSMC began mass-producing processors for NVIDIA, a fabless, California-based tech firm. And that business partnership was largely due to Chang's own relationship with NVIDIA's Taiwan-born CEO Jensen Huang, which is something I discussed with Stephen Witt, the author of Jensen Huang's new biography.
Because when Jensen had first applied to have TSMC manufacture NVIDIA's chips, the corporate salespeople turned them down. They thought NVIDIA was too small. But Morris thought it was important to cultivate relationships even with the most meager customers. And at the time, NVIDIA was like on the verge of bankruptcy. It was like 30 guys in, some cast-off C+ quality office literally about to go bankrupt. And Morris Chang said, yes, come, we'll fabricate your chips for you. He just took to Jensen immediately. And over time, NVIDIA grew to be his favorite and probably most important customer.
And now NVIDIA is among the most valuable companies in the world and is at the forefront of this boom in cutting-edge artificial intelligence.
I'm very happy to be here in Taiwan. Taiwan is the home of our treasured partners. This is, in fact, where everything NVIDIA does begins. Our partners and ourselves take it to the world. Taiwan and our partnership has created the world's AI infrastructure.
Now, it's not just that TSMC pulled ahead in this chip-making race, but Intel also fell behind. Remember how Intel came out with the game-changing microchip for PCs? Well, they continued their lead into the 90s and early 2000s. By 1992, Intel was the world's largest chip maker by revenue, according to the company's figures. But due to the rising labor costs in the US, more firms started to look for cheaper alternatives in Asia. And during this time, Intel tried to maintain both its business in processor manufacturing and also in consumer products.
Intel's been really working hard, and I give Gelsinger a lot of credit, Gelsinger being the former CEO, in driving towards improving their process technology. Again, I think Intel lost their way on that, and yet that was a critical differentiator for them. And everybody ended up moving, a lot of their business, of course, to TSMC. Not that Intel had much of an external foundry business, but for them to even be considered a reasonable alternative to TSMC, they needed to be as good as, if not a little better.
Speaking from the White House in March, US President Trump appeared to call out Intel's management.
We used to have Intel, and Intel was run by a man named Andy Grove, and he did an incredible job. He really dominated the chip business. And then he died, and I guess they had a series of people that didn't know what the hell they were doing, and we gradually lost the chip business.
Intel has recently brought in chips veteran Lip Bhutan as its new CEO.
Please welcome to the stage Chief Executive Officer Lip
A former
Bhutan.
board member of Intel, one of Tan's most prominent previous roles was the CEO of California-based Cadence, a company that makes tools used to design chips.
In my mind, what he brings to the job is a great deal of knowledge and understanding of Intel, B, a huge amount of industry experience and connections, and C, knowledge of the critical areas that Intel, I think, is going to continue to move forward in. So in my mind, this should get rid of some of the questions of are they going to sell off the foundry or what are they going to do? I think he's going to continue to focus on both of those things. And again, his experience with Cadence is particularly enlightening in that regard.
TSMC has benefited from strong government backing in Taiwan, with its headquarters and sites set up in designated zones called science parks, where officials can ensure the chipmaker has the resources it needs, like power and water. They're also physically located close to their suppliers and customers, which help cut down further on costs. The Taiwan semiconductor industry has taken decades of dedicated effort to grow. Its dominance today has become so powerful that it has become entangled with issues of national security and representing Taiwan on the world stage, in the absence of diplomatic ties with most other countries in the world. Join us in our next video, where we'll be talking about whether Taiwan's chip dominance shields it from the most existential of threats like a Chinese invasion, and whether TSMC's growing investment overseas puts that protection at risk.